The following is a presentation of the Healthcare Facilities Network. Peter Martin, the president of Gosselin Martin Associates. As always, thank you for clicking on this video, which will be a little bit shorter today. It's entitled 5 Keys. I don't know if recently we did a 2-part episode called Talk Finance and Build a Relationship with Your CFO. Occasionally what I like to do, because I know that some of the videos, even though we put them into 2 parts, they may be a little bit longer. So what I want to do, or what I've done, and this is the 3rd video that we've done like this, where we pull out 5 keys from that discussion, put them in a shorter form of video for easier consumption. And then if you want to go see the whole episode, we'll have a link to it at the end of this episode. So I'm going to share my screen with you. So bear with me for a sec. Share screen. Pull up the 5 keys. So as you can see it there, 5 keys to the FM-CFO relationship in healthcare facilities. I said this in the video, when we began the Healthcare Facilities Network back in April of this year, this was the type of episode that I envisioned. Now, I like everything we've done. I really enjoy everything we've done. And I think each episode has great value to it. And I would encourage you, this is a little bit of a promo. If you haven't subscribed, please do, because we just want to continue to push these stories out from the field that directly correlate and relate to what you do every day in a hospital. This one, and I'm not going to repeat what I said in the video, this one is especially impactful because it's such a key relationship. Budgets are short these days, dollars are tight, people are being laid off. I don't need to go over everything that's going on in this market. You live it, you're aware of it. But this relationship, is so important. And as I said, these are the types of episodes that we enjoy doing. And also, this is a little self-serving on our part. When we get to the end of this video, we were talking to Jim Corwin. Jim is the CFO, and Robert Hacker is the director of FM, and Robert reports to Jim. They're at Community Memorial Healthcare and out in California, Ventura, California. But at the end of this video, Jim said something unexpected that I really appreciated. And I'm just going to share it with you here, and then we're going to get into the 5 keys.
I'm so glad you're doing something like this, because this is something that's rarely talked about. I don't hear this when you're in the boardroom, when you're in the XYZ, when you're in a senior leadership management team. Too often the facilities person isn't as engaged. Now, Robert gets a little more engagement than most, but it's still not enough. This is an understood, discussed, and addressed issue and relationship. And I'm very impressed that I'm even having this discussion with anybody, because I think it's a great.
So I love that comment, to be perfectly frank with you, to be perfectly honest with you. As you may know, Robert's been on the network before, and I always appreciate Robert coming on. I'd never met Jim prior to this discussion. So to hear him say that, we've never had this discussion before. This is the types of stories we should be doing. That to me is why this network has been formed. And that to me is why I hope that people will tell others in healthcare facilities management of the existence. Because I think just from this episode, and if you watch the episode, you'll see that Robert and Jim have a good relationship. And not everybody is going to have a relationship like that. I certainly understand that. But if you do have that relationship, it is a bonus. And as I said, I was very happy, or I was very honored, and it was out of the ordinary to have Jim say that, because that's what we're striving for. And here's the CFO who says, this is a great discussion. It is, because, the facilities people need to be more visible. I saw a story today, and I should have read it, but I didn't. I guess it was from Modern Healthcare. Some organizations are creating a new C-level position, something called, I think it was like clinical operations or something like that, where it's a nursing medical director, and they're tapping nurses and or doctors for these roles. And I thought to myself, and again, we're very parochial here, right? I mean, we're focused on healthcare facilities management, but in my own mind, and it's probably a little defeatist, I'm like, okay, here we go. And again, let's create another C-level leadership position. Not that doctors aren't important and not that nurses aren't important, but it's the building that supports these folks and it's the building that supports patients. But anyways, I just wanted to replay that Jim note for you. And so what did we learn from this particular episode? As I've said in the past, I am not going to reread these to you. You can read them, but I thought it was very interesting. You know, a lot of the times, and I was the same way, you know, when I was working in healthcare on the hospital level, I remember, you know, we were supposedly having a meeting with our CFO. It was supposed to be every Tuesday, every other Tuesday, and it would always get canceled. And those were the meetings where you go over your lists of projects and everything from elevators to infrastructure and building envelope and, you know, new EDs. And the meeting was typically canceled. And I think, you know, part of it is the CFO is obviously busy, but it's an easy meeting to cancel because facilities is a cost center. It's not always a cost generator. Though, if you are looking for revenue generating opportunities, we just put a episode out, emergency management, making emergency management while providing life-saving care, making it also a way to increase revenue. So I would encourage you to look at that. Did that with Scott Cormier. That is available on the network now. EM is a revenue generator. But anyways, it was always easy for the CFO to cancel that meeting. And it's frustrating. It was always frustrating to us because, you know, you have an elevator and, you know, it's approaching the end of life, or, you know, you have an air handler and it's at the end of life and beyond the end of life. So this meeting was always the easiest one to cancel. But I point out number one, where Robert talks about understanding revenue sources for the hospital. Because if you understand the revenue sources, now that may not, you know, you may not get what you need. But if you have a little bit of understanding of how we get funded, well, then you might understand, okay, this is why we don't have what we need. So it's just a little bit more background information. And Robert talked about how he uses that info to inform his budget process, which I thought was very interesting. The other one I would go to is number 4 and number 5. If your relationship with your CFO or whomever, you know, whoever funds what you need to do, you know, sometimes it's easier if it's a broken relationship. Sometimes it's easier to go along with it to be a broken relationship, right? You can always say, oh, I tried, they're not giving me the money, or, you know, he never listens to me, or she never listens to me. But, you know, Jim said from his perspective as a CFO, you know, I tried is not good enough. And he also talks about circumstances where he has had some of his directors kind of go around him, go up to a COO to try to get funding. And so they talk a lot. You know, I'd originally envisioned this being more of a, and I'm not very good at math or finance, I've told you that pretty much on every video, but, you know, talking about finance and budgeting, and it went off to kind of a relationship as well. And so it was a dual episode with, you know, a little bit of finance, but also a lot of building a relationship with your CFO and having that be a functional relationship, right? This is Peter Martin. If you or your organization is interested in advertising or partnering with the Healthcare Facilities Network, including sponsoring content, then please email me using the barcode in the lower right of your screen. From the trades level to the vice president level, from planning, design, construction, project management, compliance, safety, and security, the Healthcare Facilities Network reaches FM people where FM people are. Because you want it to be functional, and it needs to be functional. So Jim gives some good examples, and I'm sure you know, and I recall some folks that I worked with who would try to go around when they didn't get an answer they liked. They'd try to go around the CFO, or they would try to go around, you know, the VP, or they would try to go around the project manager who would say no, you know. And I'm sure most hospitals operate this way because, you know, there's always a route, there's always an avenue, and people, when it comes to their own projects, their pet projects, they can get passionate. And if they hear no, well, how can I go around that no? So it happens, but you need to have that relationship with the CFO, and you need to be on that same page to try to mitigate that. You know, the other one, number 5, Jim talked about infrastructure quite a bit, and obviously Robert talks about infrastructure, but at one point in the video, Jim said infrastructure, and he had said it a couple of times, and I said to him, and I didn't mean this as a side disrespect, I said, do you always talk this way? Because from a CFO perspective, to be so focused on infrastructure and its importance to the organization, it was a little bit different. And in these days of tight budgets, long lead times, and just so many competing priorities, your infrastructure, it may be failing. Hopefully it's not failing, but it may be at its last legs. But at least if you have a CFO who kind of knows what infrastructure is, understands its importance, and knows that knows what you're operating against, it can make your job a little bit easier. May not get you what you want, but at least you have an advocate there. And I think, as we look at the relationship between, Jim and Robert, it's very much an advocacy type relationship. And that is the type of relationships that you need. So I thought, infrastructure was telling. And then, the final two things in there, be that gatekeeper. Jim talks about Robert as not, sometimes we've all been at those tables where it's easy just to say, yeah, we can do that for you. And then even though in the back of your mind, you're thinking, where are you going to get this money from? Right? Because sometimes the path of least resistance is just to say yes. The path of most resistance is to say no. So Jim and Robert have that good relationship, and they talk about that, quite a bit. And of course, with every relationship these days, a sense of realism and credibility. We talk about that a lot in recruiting. How do you build credibility? Well, one of the ways you build it is by visibility, but you also build credibility by being realistic. And that can only happen, over time. You don't build credibility right away, but, by being open and honest. If everything relative to a facility need is a fire, well, then you're probably going to have a CFO who's not going to say they're not going to listen to you, but they're always going to question you. Everything can't be a fire. And Jim, and Robert both talk about that, of being realistic. I can get 2 years out of this. I can get 3 years out of this, but then we're going to have an issue. So I thought it was a really good episode that we did. I'm going to stop the share, but that's the 5 keys from Talk Finance. Now, we could have done more, but I didn't want to pull them all out. So I would encourage you to please watch the episode. I was going to say watch the relationship. I guess you could watch the relationship in the episode. But I'll link to both episodes 1 and 2. As always, I thank you for clicking on this video. If you could subscribe to the network, give it a like. If you are struggling with your CFO, or if you know somebody, who's at a director level who's struggling with their CFO, shoot in the video. We need to start somewhere. And I think this is a good building block. This particular episode is a really nice building block along those lines. So